Iran today, a country brimming with energy, exploding with construction and development, a dynamic state with a thriving capital. The most modern achievements under a monarchy dating back 2,500 years. This was Iran, the old Persia, 3/4 of a century ago. Romantic scenes of the nomad's life. But in daily routine, wandering from snow-covered mountains in the north to the warmer plains in the south, fording streams and rivers with large herds of cattle and sheep, the struggle for survival, for the bare existence, was unbelievably hard. For those who tilled the land, even for those in the villages, it was not much more comfortable. Obtaining water for irrigation, even with the help of wells like this one, and through underground canals, the qanats, was a strenuous undertaking. Usually, the soil belonged to a feudal landlord who owned mostly the whole village and many more like it. Sometimes up to 100 villages were the property of one landlord. So, what the farmers earned with all that hard work did not even belong to them. Generally, it was divided into 5 portions. The first for the landowner, the landlord. The second for the man who provided the seed, the landlord. The third for the man who supplied the water, the landlord. The fourth for the man who provided the oxen, probably the landlord again. The peasant obtained but the last fifth, from which he had to pay taxes and try to support himself and his family. In such poverty and ignorance, nobody cared for even the most modest hygiene. And there was no chance for a brighter future. Guards on the roofs of the mud huts, always alert for armed bandits or whole nomadic tribes who could attack at any time, and often did. None of these attacks could ever be filmed, but tribes like these defied all attempts to pacify the country. Travelers through the countryside paid tolls to those tribes, who in turn protected them against attacks, or just refrained themselves from robbing them. But even if the travelers bought relative security from the bandits, the condition of the roads made each journey a hazardous adventure. The caravanserai, a fortified place providing shelter for the caravans at night, a trading center by day. But not a totally secure shelter, because against a marauding tribe there was no guaranteed security in those days in old Persia, where there was no such thing as a strong central government with an effective police force. Girls heavily veiled. Children memorizing Quran verses by heart, but for most of them, this was all they ever learned to read. Children laboring at the age of 8. In the countryside, they might even begin working in the fields at a younger age. These scenes are but a reflection of the autocratic system prevailing in the adult world as well. (1906) Revolution. Persia was the first country in the Middle and Near East where a revolution in favor of a democratic constitution occurred and was successful. The constitutionalists, among them quite a number of clergymen, forced the then Shah to abdicate in favor of his son. In 1909, with active Russian military help, the exiled Shah tried to regain power and abolish the constitution, but failed. It was not the first time that Russia intervened in Persian affairs. Between the population and commercial centers of Europe and the Far East, Iran, formerly known as Persia, lies about midway, a link between East and West. This strategic location a source of constant dispute with her neighbors. The famous Silk Road, the ancient trade route between Europe and China, crossed this country. There also is pressure for a path from north to south. Iran's northern neighbor, the Russian giant, looking longingly at the ice-free harbors on the Persian Gulf. Iran also was a neighbor of India, which until 1947 was England's most important colony. In 1907, Russia and England carved out zones of influence in Iran, in the north for the Tsar, in the southeast along the Indian border for the British Empire. In the First World War, Iran again was the football of the big powers. Russia had established military bases in northern Iran. Turkey, aligned with Germany and Austria-Hungary against Russia and her allies, failed to persuade Iran to oust the Russians. So Turkey sent troops into Iran. In a counterattack, new Russian divisions poured into the northern region, and English troops pushed northward from the Persian Gulf to the Caspian Sea. During the past century, England and Russia again and again wrung economic concessions from the weak Persian government. Russia gained the provinces of Georgia and Armenia from Persia as early as 1813 and 1828. Persian refugees fleeing the invading foreign armies. toll barriers in the middle of a nominally sovereign state erected by occupation forces. With the help of tribal leaders and local chieftains, the English forcibly recruited a Persian police force called the South Persia Rifles. They even went so far as to free convicted robbers to enlist them in their auxiliary corps. Britain's main interest? Oil. As early as 1901, the Englishman William Knox D'Arcy had been granted a 60-year oil concession. Years of unremitting efforts finally led to the discovery of large oil fields some 150 miles northeast of Abadan. That day, the 26th of May, 1908, marked the beginning of the oil industry in the Middle East. Oil, at that time, being transported on donkeys and horseback. The English and the Russians, who had quarreled over Persia so often, as war allies, were now on rather good terms. But that alliance came to an abrupt end when in 1917 the Bolshevik Revolution was successful. Russia withdrew from the war, although not from her imperialist traditions. In 1920, the Bolsheviks invaded the Persian province of Gilan to help a rebellious tribal leader establish the Soviet Republic of Gilan on Persian territory. When the Red Army withdrew, their puppet regime was quickly overthrown. Tens of thousands of refugees aggravated the misery of Iran's own war-stricken people, the White Russians who had fled the Reds. They came from a country embroiled in civil war into a country in chaos. There was but one military unit in Persia which had anything resembling discipline, the Persian Cossack Brigade. And there was one man, Reza Khan, serving in that brigade, who was to change the destiny of his country. While most of the officers in the Cossack Brigade were Russians, Reza Khan was pure Persian from northern Iran. He was born in a little village in the province of Mazandaran near the Caspian Sea in northern Persia in a modest little house. In August 1920, Reza dismissed all Russian officers and took over command of the brigade. And February 21st, 1921, was the day of Reza Khan's coup d'etat with his Cossacks. He marched to Tehran and overthrew a weak and tottering government. No blood was shed, and as Minister of War, he first reorganized the Persian army and then began to pacify the country. In order to establish a strong central power, he fought the rebellious tribes and marauding bandits. No documentary film exists of those battles, but these film scenes produced years later give an impression of how the field campaign was fought. It was no easy task for a commander-in-chief who once was heard to exclaim, "If only I had 1,000 rifles of the same caliber." The equipment of his soldiers was still that bad. But eventually, firm control over the whole country was established. National sovereignty was paralleled in the international field. Within 5 days of the new government's reign, all Russian concessions in Iran were abolished, concessions for Britain granted by the old government canceled, with the exception of the old oil concession. The government's troop movements had been seriously hampered by the almost complete lack of adequate roads. One of Reza's first actions was to start construction of a network of main roads, a task accomplished with largely inadequate means, but with much enthusiasm. In 1925, the last Shah of the Qajar dynasty, who had spent most of his time traveling abroad, as here in Rome with Italy's King Umberto, was deposed by the Majlis, Iran's parliament. Reza Khan, then prime minister, is elected Shah. Some months later, in April 1926, the official coronation takes place on the so-called Peacock Throne. Shah Reza was not the first officer of simple origin to ascend to the Persian throne. 190 years before, Nadir Shah, called the Napoleon of Persia, had preceded him, reunified the country, defeated the Turks, and forced the Russians out of Persian territory they had occupied. Out of Reza Shah's family, his eldest son, Mohammad Reza, is appointed crown prince. Some years later, Reza Shah sends his son to the Swiss College of Rossay. He becomes an excellent soccer player. The years of the government of Reza Shah, later to be named Reza Shah the Great, are the years in which the foundations of a sovereign and modern state are laid, the years in which Iran is reborn. Resurgence of a once great country, ships sailing under the Iranian flag, ports, roads, communication systems, a whole national infrastructure developing, and foreign monopolies inside Iran, for instance tobacco sales or telephone and telegraph lines, nationalized. Perhaps the most impressive achievement, the Trans-Iranian Railway. Work begins in 1927 and is to last for 12 years. Unlike previous undertakings under the old dynasty, this work is financed not by foreign loans, but entirely by Iranian means, through a special tax on sugar and tea. Millions of Iranians are thus contributing to the top priority national task through their personal sacrifice. The first line, from the Persian Gulf to the Caspian Sea, connecting south and north over 900 miles, requires construction of 4,100 bridges and 224 tunnels of an aggregate length of 54 miles. As an engineering achievement, experts consider the Trans-Iranian Railway as more impressive than even the famous Swiss railways. In 1928, the king of neighboring Afghanistan pays the first state visit to the newly born Iran. There are parallels and similar interests of the two states. Like Iran, Afghanistan is a Muslim state. Like Iran, she has the giant neighbor in the north, Russia, and has had to cope with foreign intervention in the past. And the exercises performed as a show for the guest, the traditions of the Zur Hana, the House of Strength, are a symbol of the strength needed to maintain sovereignty in such a precarious situation. Another state visit with another neighbor. Reza Shah, this time not the host, but the guest. Visit to Kemal Ataturk, founder of New Turkey. Reza Shah had long wished, as he states in his arrival speech, to meet Ataturk. Turkey is facing similar problems as Iran. I am very glad to see you in Turkey. Reza Shah's answer, I am definitely glad to have been able to fulfill an old wish of mine to pay a visit to your country. One of the reforms common to both countries, emancipation of women. Heavily veiled with the Qadr, excluded from participation in public life under rigid Orthodox Muslim rule, women and girls under Reza Shah are virtually liberated from their confinement to the house, against bitter resistance from large segments of the clergy. Girls studying modern household methods, new and healthier nutrition. Hundreds of new schools are built. For the first time, compulsory government-sponsored primary education. The first Persian university is inaugurated. Numerous young Iranians are sent abroad to study with state financing. In addition to the university's medical faculty, systematic medical training is introduced in the army. Junkers planes, the first step towards an Iranian air force. Along German and French lines, the new Iranian army is being reformed. World War I had proved to the Iranians, a peace-loving people, how badly they needed a strong army for self-defense. From the very beginning, Iran is a member of the League of Nations. Prince Arfa, her delegate, here voting in favor of defeated but now democratic Germany's admittance in 1925. In 1938, a big celebration in Tehran. The parade of the new Iranian forces is watched by the military attachés from Italy, France, Germany. Celebration of a wedding day. Crown Prince Mohammad Reza is married to Princess Fauzi of Egypt, a liaison which will be unsuccessful. Fireworks celebrating the marriage. There will be other fireworks within only 1 year. War in Africa, not so far away from Iran's frontiers. The Second World War will have its impact on Iran soon.
Onward, Christian soldiers, marching as to war.
Onward, Christian soldiers. Roosevelt and Churchill agree upon the Atlantic Charter, guaranteeing every nation's right to self-determination. But in flagrant violation of the provisions of the Charter, Iran will soon be made a victim of the big powers' conflict. British bombers attack the Iranian fleet and sink most of the ships, causing considerable loss of life. In World War II, the Allies saw the Persian oil fields and India threatened by the Axis powers under Hitler. By summer 1941, German troops occupied the Balkans and were threatening Egypt and moving towards the Don. 1.5 years later, in November 1942, the threat was real. The Germans stood in force on the doorstep of the Nile Delta and in the Caucasus Mountains. Reza Shah had declared his country neutral, but in August 1941, as they had done in the First World War, without forewarning, the Russians and the English invaded Iran. British troops enter Iran from the south, Russians from the north. For the British, one of the main targets is, again, the oil, as in World War I. So, British soldiers celebrate the occupation of Abadan. Soon, Russian and British units meet in the middle of a sovereign country, just like occupation powers. The banquet is an Anglo-Russian affair with no Iranians invited. Officially, the capital of Tehran is exempt from occupation, but in reality, very soon it will be a center of foreign activities. The German embassy is closed. Neutral Switzerland for a short while takes over. The presence of some 2,000 German nationals in Iran accused by the Allies of underground activities had served as a pretext for the occupation. The Germans are now interned, then deported. Reza Shah had established much of Iran's foreign trade with Germany since he had wanted to counteract Russian and British influence. Now the Shah himself, here in his last filmed appearance with 2 of his sons, abdicates and leaves the country. He will die some years later in South Africa in exile. As soon as the Shah is gone, rebellious tribes again engage in their private wars and marauding activities. The true masters for the moment, the British and Soviet ambassadors, are of course interested in the security of their soldiers, but not so much in the stability of the government. The Allies at that time calculated that a weak Persian Republican government might be easier to handle than the monarch. To ensure inner stability, the Crown Prince consequently has to act quickly. In Parliament, Mohammad Reza, within a few days after his father's abdication, takes the oath as the new Shah. Under the circumstances, it is almost a new coup d'etat. Tehran, 1943. This is the city where the first conference of the Big Three will take place, a conference decisive for the fate of the post-war world. Strangely enough, the Russian embassy was to be the home for America's President Roosevelt as well as for Stalin, while Churchill was living in the British legation. Toward the end of 1943, the Big Three are, of course, preoccupied with the big decisions which would determine their future mutual relationship. In commemoration of the Battle of Stalingrad, a sword of honor is presented by Churchill to Stalin. At that time, quite a few of the British military leaders are convinced that the Battle of Stalingrad not only saved Russia from defeat, but also Iran from a German invasion. Hey! Hip, hip, hey! Hip, hip, hey! 3 cheers for Churchill, who celebrates his birthday while in Tehran. A fur cap and other souvenirs of Iranian handicraft are the gifts, a tribute from a country whose interests were for the greater part neglected by the occupying powers. Mohammad Reza Shah meets Churchill and Roosevelt and Stalin. Owing to Mohammad Reza's successful negotiations, the independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity of Iran is finally recognized by the Allies in a solemn declaration. Meanwhile, an American contingent of 30,000 technicians in uniform had joined the British and the Soviets on Iranian territory. But at least the Americans, visited here by their president, had not come as invaders. In addition to Iran's oil fields, the Allies had another important concern. Russia badly needed weapons and supplies for the war against the Germans, but most of her coastline was blocked by winter ice, and her few ice-free ports were threatened by German submarines. So the route through Iran was very inviting for the supplies which eventually saved Russia. In a study for Hitler, the German General Staff states that all British or American war material which reaches Russia by way of the Near East is extremely disadvantageous to our land offensive. British and American planes are sent to the Soviet Union in large numbers. Out of 14,834 American planes, 1/3 are delivered via the Persian Gulf. Around 500,000 trucks reach the USSR, of which nearly 50% come via Iran. 88% of these are assembled in Iranian workshops. Later, Iran herself declares war on Hitler. The Trans-Iranian Railway hauled 3 out of every 5 tons of supply delivered through the corridor to Soviet receiving points. Irony of history. Reza Shah forged in the Iranian railway a powerful weapon against the very Germans whose friendship hastened the wartime occupation and his abdication. The American deliveries alone are sufficient to maintain 60 divisions in the line. So Iran, one of the main keys to the Allied success, is called the Bridge of Victory. Iran, in the meantime, suffers heavily from the effects of the occupation. Shortage of goods and the relative wealth of the foreign troops drive prices up 400% in 2.5 years. In their declaration of 1943, the Big Three had promised economic assistance, but during the war, Iran is the last on their list for help. And there are not only the foreign soldiers. Tens of thousands of Polish refugees from Hitler's invasion have come to Iran via the Soviet Union. They too have to be fed. The Allies help, but so do the Iranians, who themselves are short of everything. A Polish-Iranian festival in Tehran. Quite a number of these Polish refugees will stay in Iran even after the war. Through intermarriage, still today there is quite a large Polish element, particularly in Tehran. The greater part, however, will leave very soon as members of the Polish Brigade recruited in Iran for fighting Hitler. What can be saved of Reza Shah's heritage under the occupation? With most of the power in the hands of the foreign forces, what influence is left for the Shah? In those days, Mohammad Reza Shah takes advantage of the unique role of the Americans who had not invaded Iran and had no imperialist past there, as had the Russians and English. Those war years mark the beginning of a close American-Iranian relationship. In 1944, when the United Nations is founded, again Iran, as in the case of the League of Nations, is among the first members. But again, as with the League of Nations, she is deceived with her high expectations.
You have created a great instrument for peace and security and human progress in the world. The world must now use it. With this charter, the world can begin to look forward to the time when all worthy human beings may be permitted to live decently as free people. This new structure of peace is rising upon strong foundations. Let us not fail to grasp this supreme chance to establish a worldwide rule of reason, to create an enduring peace under the guidance of God.
But this enduring peace is first endangered in the case of Iran. While the Soviets here in Tabriz are celebrating the anniversary of their revolution, Stalin refuses to evacuate their zone despite a 1942 treaty providing for withdrawal of all foreign troops 6 months after ceasefire. Iran's prime minister, intimidated by Soviet threats, gives in to Molotov's demands in Moscow, oil concessions and approval of a friendly government in Iran's province of Azerbaijan, which means a communist government. But at home in Tehran, Parliament refuses to ratify the Moscow Agreement, and the Shah orders his United Nations delegate to submit the matter to the Security Council. First case of the Cold War between East and West.
Between the Iranian government and the government of the Soviet Union, it has been agreed that the Red Army evacuate all Persian territory by the 6th May 1946.
Gromyko, surprised by the Shah's unexpected intervention through his delegate and confronted with stern resistance from Iran and the U.S., finally has to agree to Soviet withdrawal from Azerbaijan.
И, во-вторых, после завершения определенной стадии рассмотрения 4 апреля вынес решение о продолжении его рассмотрения 6 мая.
Mr. President, any sovereign state, if foreign troops are continuing to remain in its territory without its consent beyond the date authorized by treaty, such complaints present grave issues under Article 2 of Section 4 of the Charter of the United Nations as to the, quote, the threat or the use of force against the territorial integrity or the political independence of any state or in any other manner inconsistent with the purposes of the Charter.
When the Soviets evacuate Azerbaijan, they leave behind a communist puppet regime which declares Iran's northwestern province independent. Yet this regime is overthrown as soon as the Red Army is gone. Finally, the Iranians are again masters in their own house. But since during the war the occupying powers had enforced priority number 1 for their interest, Iran's economy is in terrible condition. Nothing could be done in all these war years to develop the country. On the contrary, it had been bled white. So Iran is poorer than ever. After re-establishment of central power, Iran must regain international respect. First steps to that goal where even a poor country can compete in the field of sports. Apart from their favorite traditional pastime, polo, the Iranians are preparing themselves for the first Olympic Games after the war. They'll be extraordinarily successful in weightlifting and wrestling. Mohammad Reza Shah himself visits the London Games of 1948 to demonstrate Iran's presence. Peace pigeons. But can there be real peace in a world facing so sharp a contrast between the poor and the rich? 1 year after that visit to London, the first attempt on the Shah's life is made. He very narrowly escapes death. Behind that attempt is an alliance of the extreme right and the extreme left, reactionaries and communists. In the following years, 4 more such attempts will be made. In the first years of the United Nations' existence, much is expected from this organization. So the Shah pays a visit to the World Forum to plead for his country.
This plenary session of the General Assembly is now in order. Gentlemen, His Imperial Majesty, Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi, Shahinshah of Iran.
I accept your greeting on behalf of the nation which I represent. Not one of the largest countries in the world, it is true, but one of the oldest and one of the most persistent in honoring all that pertains to the elevation of the human spirit. Here, in this assembly of the United Nations, whether large or small, powerful or weak, countries should meet as equals. Without peace, the smaller countries can make no advance in their efforts to attain high living standards and social justice. With peace, we can do all. For Iran, peace is not an abstraction. We want to use it to further our domestic progress. Therefore, speaking in behalf of one of the smaller countries, I make this appeal. Do not fail us. Give us the future. Give us the inner assurance of peace. Assure us of our freedom and our independence, in which we can contribute to the progress of civilization, each land according to its national culture and tradition. Let us, great countries and small, compete with each other only in the fields of peaceful achievement. Then, but not until then, will mankind, released from fear, live in a brighter, happier world.
The Shah's appeal, though welcomed emphatically by world opinion, does not help very much. United States aid at that time remains negligible. For the most part, Iran is left alone with her problems. The country does possess natural riches which could help to develop Persia, but Iran's oil is being exploited by others. It is the British who get the lion's share of the huge oil profits and who refuse for a long time to grant a greater share to the country from whose soil this wealth is extracted. In this situation, demagogues are ready at hand. The then Prime Minister propagates nationalization of the oil industry, expropriation of the foreign companies. No more concessions for any foreigner. Iran must do everything on her own. The architect of this radical policy, Prime Minister Mossadegh. When the British do not agree, he stops oil production. But Iran at this time has not yet the means to sell the oil on her own. Without the oil revenues, the state is soon bankrupt. While British technicians and their families leave the country, America's Special Ambassador Harriman, as an intermediary, tries to settle the dispute. But Mossadegh refuses any compromise. He adheres stubbornly to his policy of all or nothing. Harriman's mission in Tehran fails. In a wave of nationalist emotions with a strict press censorship imposed by Mossadegh, the voice of reason has no chance. Parliament backs Mossadegh's policy. The British-Iranian case is submitted to the United Nations as well as to the International Court in The Hague. But Mossadegh's arguments do not impress the international authorities too much. Direct negotiations are recommended between Britain and Iran. Mossadegh's policy fails. Backed by the extreme left, the communist-oriented Today party, and the extreme right, Mossadegh organizes riots in Tehran. Their aim, to overthrow the Shah, who has decided to dismiss his prime minister, whose policy he feels is disastrous for the country. For a short time, it seems as if this rebellion, directed by the prime minister against the monarch, is successful. But when opposition papers manage to publish the news that Mossadegh has been dismissed, a fact which until then was kept secret by the premier, the wave rolls back. Demonstrations in favor of the Shah, in which the military joins too, although Mossadegh had recently removed many high-ranking officers loyal to the Shah and replaced them by his followers. General Zahedi, appointed prime minister by the Shah, takes over government. Weeks before, it had been decided by the Shah that if Mossadegh would use force to resist his deposition, the Shah and the Queen would temporarily leave the country. The Shah writes, "I had decided upon this move because I believed that it would force Mossadegh and his henchmen to show their real allegiances, and that thereby it would help crystallize Persian public opinion." Consequently, the royal couple had gone to Rome to return after only 5 days' absence. The Shah is now resolved to rule, not only reign. Events have shown that democracy cannot work without democrats, so it must be developed gradually, just as with the country's economy. The Shah's return, which puts an end to the wrong methods pursued by Mossadegh, is welcomed enthusiastically. But it would be foolish to think that there are not enough enemies left who would all too readily wage another civil war. If Washington expressed open sympathy for the Shah remaining in power, the Today Party was helped secretly but very efficiently by Moscow. Mossadegh's house, from which he had fled through the back entrance, only to be captured within 1 day. Mossadegh's trial for high treason. He had always been sick and made a show of the sickness at every suitable occasion. Having suppressed Parliament and democracy, he in effect had staged a revolution. The death penalty is threatening, but the Shah intervenes. He is sentenced to 3 years' imprisonment, after which he'll live for a number of years on his country estate until his death. Under the new government, a settlement is reached with the British over the oil issue. In the meantime, Iran is preparing to take over gradually all oil production. Iranian experts are being trained, foreign investment is encouraged, but the old system of concessions definitely is abolished. For the first time in her modern history, Iran is now sovereign in every field. And for the first time in her relations with Great Britain, as here on the occasion of a state visit to London, Iran is treated as an equal sovereign power. In this new role, state visit of the Shah and his then-wife Soraya to Russia, the other world power which intervenes so often in Persian affairs. Talks with the communists. Talks with the Pope. In her long history, Iran has always had an outstanding tradition of tolerance toward other religious groups. Representatives of the powers with whom the country will be linked more and more economically come to Iran. Eisenhower from the United States. Chancellor Adenauer from the Federal Republic of Germany. On this occasion, Soraya, partly of German descent, is interpreting. Her marriage to the Shah will not produce an heir to the throne, vital for the dynasty, and they'll be divorced shortly. Germany is to become Iran's second greatest trading partner in the years to come. Hamburg Harbor. The policy of independence and self-reliance requires know-how and modern equipment. Learning and purchasing abroad, as at Stuttgart and the Mercedes plant, which eventually will become partly Persian property when the oil boom for the first time makes possible Iranian investments abroad. On December 21st, 1959, Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi is married to Faradiba. In Tehran streets, bands play. Among Persian marches, the Kankan from Offenbach's Paris Life. A splendid wedding, but the departure for the royal honeymoon will be delayed. Political tension at the Iraqi-Iranian frontier. When they finally leave Tehran, the crowd will shout, "God bless you," with a son. Ten months later, a son is born to the royal couple, vital for the dynasty, for Iran's monarchy, for the stability of the country, an heir to the throne, Reza. To celebrate the event, the Shah orders 2 holidays for the whole country. We are abolishing the notion of plowboy and make him a free farmer. In January 1963, the Shahenshah, the revolutionary operating from the throne, announces his program of social reforms. In the first place, land reform. The crown land has been distributed already. Now the big estates of the landlords are to be included in the program. Land for the landless. The reform is bitterly opposed by the landlords and parts of the clergy, assisted by the extreme left. But the most fanatic resistance is delivered by a number of clergymen against the voting right for women, essential part of the revolution from the throne. Yet the program is carried through. Women not only vote, but are elected as members of parliament as well as of the Senate. Symbol of the new role of women in Muslim Iran is the active participation of Farah, the Shah Banu, in representing the dynasty, the state. She's in charge of whole sectors of national life, particularly in the fields of social activities, art, and culture. Between 1964 and 1976, the number of children in primary schools has risen from 1.7 million to 4.1 million. In high schools, from 326,000 to almost 2 million. Of 152,000 students in higher education, about 1/3 are women. In 1975, at Tehran University, 44% of all graduates in medicine were women, 47% in pharmacology as well as in social sciences, and 55% in education. In 1980, Iran is to host the next Grand Conference of the world's universities. The basis for such achievements, the Literacy Corps. Founded to fight illiteracy, it's performing the most peaceful task armed forces could fulfill. Thousands of soldiers, after 4 months of initial training, are sent out to the most remote villages. When the Shah People's Revolution begins, illiteracy in Iran is about 85%. To bring progress to a country like this is a giant task. Nature has built barriers everywhere. The land is virtually torn by its bizarre geological formations. by ranks of jagged mountains springing abruptly from the plains, by the spectacular folding of the rocks. For its major part, the country, high and dry, seems to be barren and almost devoid of life. From the southern regions burnt by the scorching sun, the Trans-Iranian Railway provides one of the few connections to the Caspian littoral in the north, where rainfall reaches 60 inches per year. Yet, as everywhere in Iran, most of the country's 60,000 villages are isolated from the outside world, the greater part of them strewn over Iran's high plateau and mountains. Thousands of years the peasants have been living like this. To introduce the 20th century here requires ingenious and specifically Iranian methods. The province of Gilan, bordering the Caspian Sea, is one of the richest agricultural areas. But even here, many of the villages are almost inaccessible. The inhabitants celebrate the appearance of a helicopter with an impromptu dance. The nomadic tribes, the Kurds, Lurs, Bakhtiari, Kashkoi, Baluchis, Turkomans, 1/10 of the population, wandering from south to north, from north to south, present the utmost difficulty to systematic development. Their contribution to the country's animal husbandry is essential. But how, for instance, can the government introduce modern methods of sheep breeding or compulsory primary education in a tribe steadily on the move? What future under these circumstances do the children have? For the school problem, a solution was found. Since students from the regular universities could not stand the hardships of nomadic life, tribesmen were trained at special faculties. They are wandering with the tribes, teaching 70,000 children a year in Iran's mobile schools, the schools of the white tents. A health corps team. Medical school graduates serve an 18-month term in often remote rural districts after an initial military medical training of 6 months. Thanks to their help, infant mortality in rural areas has been reduced by half within 10 years. Top priority is given to family planning. Iran has one of the highest population growth rates in the world, over 3% a year. The Extension and Development Corps is the third branch of the Army's Revolutionary Corps as part of the Social Reform Program. Its task, rebuilding and modernizing the countryside, teaching the farmers new methods. In 10 years, a total of 28,000 men and women have performed this task, while 120,000 belong to the Literacy Corps and 13,000 to the Health Corps. Among other activities, the Development Corps has set up model farms on 250,000 hectares. But what has become of the revolution's prime target, the land reform, after the first 12 years? How many Iranians are living on the land, and how are they living? In the Ministry of Agriculture, Secretary of State Gravamian answers.
I should say that the total number of the peasants in the farms have been 75% of the total population in the country, and it has been reduced to 50% during this period, and the target is to be reduced to 25% in future. The holding of land by these people ranges between 0.5 to 2.5 hectares, which is not enough for someone to live for a family. And that is why in the farm cooperatives this has been increased to something about 7 to 10 hectares per family. The average earning of the farmers have been less than or around $100 per capita per year. And now we have increased these to something about $1,000. Of course, this figure cannot be compared with $2,200 per capita in the town or average for the country. And we have to increase these, and this is one of our problems in the country.
The main problem is shortage of water. To be exact, it's shortage of water at the right times and in the right places. Mountain snow provides the main source of water in Iran. In spring, the mountains are barren of vegetation and the water runs off them too fast. Floods result in over-irrigation, which means more erosion and salinization of the soil. Within a few weeks, the land is dried out again. Iran covers about 1.6 million square kilometers. However, about 1/3 of this huge area is mountainous. Another third is desert and steppes. And the remaining third is forest and sparse pasture land. Only 8.2% is cultivated. As one of the main remedies, huge dams have been built in order to prevent floods and store water for irrigation. 15 big dams will eventually make possible cultivation of an area totaling 1 million hectares, formerly desert. But land reform and irrigation alone are not sufficient. The small holdings are too small to provide a living. The answer is larger units of production. The Aryamer Farm Corporation in Persepolis in the province of Fars, the center of ancient Persia, is a model corporation. The director, an agricultural engineer, explains the system. The Aryamer Farm Corporation was the first of its kind to be founded in the province of Fars in 1968. This corporation has 80 member families, each of them holding 25 equal shares. The 1,700 hectares being cultivated by the farm corporation formerly belonged to one landlord. Under the land reform laws, they were handed over to the peasants. Although the problems of the advanced countries still seem rather remote, planners at the top level already are aware of them. What will the farmers, the laborers do with rising incomes? How will they spend their money? As the director reports, at Aryamer, the farmers' incomes are already 3 to 4 times as high as they were before the corporation was established. In addition to their better earnings, members of the corporation are cared for in many ways. Name, Halvan. Age, 35. Father's name, Sipansa. Medical care through the Health Corps girl is free. And there are other welfare institutions not known in the old villages enticing peasants to join a cooperative or corporation. For instance, the kindergarten. In Iran, where family ties are stronger than in Western countries, kindergartens are in their initial stage yet. But with the rapid growth of the number of women working outside the house, more kindergartens will be needed. Free kindergarten and school meals are part of a welfare and social security system which is meant to eventually embrace all Iranians, laborers and employees as well as self-employed persons. It's interesting to note that the social insurance premium is 30% of the earnings, of which 20% is paid by the employer, 3% by the government, and 7% by the employee. For medical treatment, the employee pays a franchise of 20%. For hospital bills, 10%. He has free choice of his doctor or hospital. The daily prayer. We thank our God who gave us peace. We pray for Iran, a cradle of peace, and for our kind King of Kings, that he should live forever. We pray that Father remains healthy. If he is healthy, Mother will be at peace. We shall learn to read and write and serve Iran, thanks to our God. Iran's farmers have increased output considerably, but food consumption has been rising at the rate of 10% a year, with growing incomes and with a steadily growing population. So in spite of tremendous efforts, the country, self-sufficient in food in the early 1960s, had to pay $1.4 billion in 1975 for food imports. As in most developing countries, population growth surpasses production increase. 2,500 years ago, the Persians, under Cyrus the Great, built the world's first imperial power. It stretched from the Bosporus to the Indus, from Jerusalem to the Aral Sea. In the following half-century, Cyrus's successors extended the empire still farther, to Libya and Macedonia, and to the mouth of the Indus. One of the ironies of history, the original kingdom of Cyrus covered roughly the same area as the countries of today's CENTO Defense Treaty members, Iran, Turkey, and Pakistan. The Iran of today still is so big in total area that there would be room for nearly all the 9 countries of the European community: West Germany, Denmark, France, Ireland, Britain, the Benelux, and Italy. October 28, 1967, 26 years after Mohammad Reza Shah had ascended to the throne, the official coronation takes place. Why so late? The Shah had said repeatedly that he didn't find any glory in being king over millions of poverty-stricken and disease-ridden people. So he didn't want the coronation before his social revolution had had its first clear successes. A unique event. For the first time in over 1,000 years, an empress is crowned in Persia, the Shahbanu Farah. She will be regent in case the Shahanshah should die before Crown Prince Reza comes of age. This again symbolizes one of the most important and radical changes in the social structure of Iran: equal rights for women. In an age when so many monarchies perish, Iran still adheres to her constitutionalist traditions. With the oldest constitution in all Asia, she still remains a monarchy. This ancient land's armed forces today are continually equipped with the latest weapons. Iran's military strength has aroused suspicion even in the West. It should be remembered, however, that Iran again and again in her history has been unable to resist so many foreign invasions because of her military weakness. The Shah, here with Egypt's Sadat, has learned his lesson. Reinforcement of Iran's military power is meant to assure peace in the Gulf region. Vital for the Western world. Through the lifeline of the Persian Gulf, more than half of the oil imports of Western Europe, 80% of most African states, 90% of Japan, 60% of Australia is being transported. If only a single tanker would be sunk in the Strait of Hormuz, this lifeline could be cut. Oil, the basis of Iran's wealth. The oil boom offering new opportunities, new challenges for the country's development, and new dangers. The oil story, the story of a miracle. But Iran's oil reserves are limited. Estimates vary between 20 and 30 years. So it's understandable that the country's ruler is in a hurry to carry through his development programs. Did Iran, this laboratory of the developing world, jump too fast from the Middle Ages into the 20th century? Inevitably, there are drawbacks when too many things have to be done too quickly. But the reasoning behind this haste is clear. The Shah expressed it when he told laborers that in 30 years' time, their industrial exports must compete with those of other advanced countries. Otherwise, it would be impossible to maintain the present standard of living. With the newly gained electric energy, industrialization is accelerated rapidly. The first nuclear reactors are being built by the Germans with a view toward a future without oil. Steel mills built by the Russians, partly in exchange for delivery of natural gas to the Soviet Union. Iran possesses some of the largest natural gas fields in the world, besides commercial quantities of coal and many minerals. Iranian assembly and manufacturing plants already produce the greater part of all motor vehicles now needed in the country. With so many ambitious projects, there is a continuous shortage of manpower. To close the gap, women are encouraged to take jobs, and with high wages and the industrial boom, they respond in ever-increasing numbers. With so much money pouring into the country, rising prices cannot be avoided. But wages in industry go up at a higher rate. The Shah People's Revolution lays much emphasis on reforms in the industrial and social field. The Shah addressing workers.
برای بار دوم در بزرگداشت روز
It is for the second time that I join you on Labor Day. One of the points of the revolution is a profit-sharing system for workers and the introduction of ownership participation. Eventually, 49% of the shares of private enterprises will be offered to employees, workers, and the general public. Crown Prince Reza handing out certificates and decorating vocational trainees. What will their future be? Will the change of attitudes, of traditional behavior prevailing for 1,000 years be quick and radical enough to transform their country overnight? The solutions offered by the Shah People's Revolution seem to be better suited to Iran's needs than any other existing model, be it in East or West. Might Iran's way even become an example for other nations? What has been achieved up to now is astounding, but the challenge is a giant one. In 1971, Iran celebrates her 2,500th birthday as a nation, as a state, and as a monarchy, the oldest monarchy in the world with the youngest dynasty. But looking back to the empire of Cyrus, of Darius, of Xerxes, a cultural tradition older than that of the Greeks. Darius and Artaxerxes freed the Jews from Babylonian captivity. The Achaemenid dynasty created the first commonwealth of nations. It was a blending of the civilizations of the ancient world. Mesopotamia, Egypt, Syria, Asia Minor, the Greek cities, and even India into one original whole. Hegel once wrote, "The principle of development begins with the history of Persia. This constitutes strictly the beginning of world history, the first world empire, and, still more noteworthy, a form of government which for the first time in history on so large a scale was animated by a genuine spirit of justice and tolerance for all, regardless of race, color, and creed." The hearts of the Persians are still in the ruins of Persepolis, the ancient capital built in 520 BC by Darius, 230 years later burned by Alexander of Macedonia. Darius the Great, the King of Kings. The ancient inscriptions in which the kings tell the story of their empire. In the treasury nearby, thousands of tablets were found giving detailed accounts of wages and working conditions, revealing the first social system in history and the attention already paid to human rights. The kings presenting their gifts to the King of Kings. Throughout the vast empire, a whole network of roads and communications was established. Fortresses and post stations for commerce and the imperial administration were built. Throughout the centuries, on the ruins of old towns, new ones were erected. And again, on the remnants of these, layer on layer, in this country so often invaded. During these thousands of years, the Iranians were often conquered, yet never colonized. So they remained a proud people, conscious of their history and of their heritage. Iran today. Women even playing soccer, symbol of a radical revolution against deep-rooted taboos, habits, prejudices. Iran today, a unique endeavor, a bloodless revolution without class struggle. Its objectives, free farmers, workers as co-owners of their factories, an all-embracing system of social security. Whether there will be, in the end, a newly structured society will depend on these Iranians, on the young.
Wenn es ein bisschen laut wird, schrubb ich mir den Rücken. Sagt das Mädchen.